Football is the most popular sport on earth.
Encara Messi, encara Messi, encara Messi, encara Messi, encara Messi. Aguero!
And it's a fact. About 4 billion people have seen some of the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, and 700 million of them watched the World Cup final between Argentina and Germany.
You'll never see anything like this ever again!
That's around 9% of the world's population. It's played by professionals and amateurs, on grass or sand, and by people of all ages, and cherished by fans from all over the world. So the real question is, what are the factors responsible for football's global dominance as the #1 sport? To prove my point, I will compare football with other sports like rugby, basketball, tennis and handball. Sports like swimming, boxing and running won't be included because they are by default the most popular physical exercises, and they were practiced by humans since thousands of years ago. Running and swimming are a necessity, and football is more of a luxury, and also because they only become relevant once every 4 years in the Olympics. And boxing is basically fighting. Cricket and field hockey won't be included because they are only exclusively popular in the Indian subcontinent, England with some other countries, and rare are the ones who care about baseball outside of America and Japan. Let's begin with a bit of history. "2,000 years ago, football first appeared in China and it was called Cuju. It was a game that involved kicking the ball with your feet into a net. The use of hands was prohibited. Cuju was also used for military training. But then many various forms of football appeared in England. The term football designates a family of sports that involve kicking a ball to score a goal. Football, aka Association of Football, branched out of that family in 1863. That's when the rules of football we know today were set, aka codified. Surprisingly, at least for me, rugby was codified 18 years before football in 1845. It is said that forms of sports that consisted of handling the ball existed since the Romans. One of them is still practiced today, and it's called Calcio Fiorentino. It began in the 15th century in Italy. It's a brutal, aggressive and skull-wrecking sport. Go check it out. It's fun. American football is basically rugby with helmets. This sport is also called Gridiron. Tennis was codified in England in the 1870s. It first started in France in the 12th century, and rackets were introduced until the 16th century. Yeah, they actually used the palm of their hands to serve the ball. Handball had also a bit of history since the Roman Empire and medieval France, but the current one was predominant in Germany and Scandinavia, and it was codified in the end of the 19th century. Unlike other sports, basketball isn't linked to some antique sport. Rather, it was invented not in America, but in Canada in 1891 by a physical education instructor called James Naismith. So basically, football was codified before the likes of handball or basketball, so it had a clear 30-year head start to popularize itself. Well, that's half the truth. One of the reasons why football is so popular today is due to the British Empire in both the 19th and 20th centuries. At its peak, in 1922, the empire occupied 35.5 kilometers square of land, which is a quarter of the total of Earth's land area. That's quite big. They controlled trade routes in the seas and had the strongest naval army of that time, which made it easier for them to spread their culture. Wherever British workers went, be it to South America or Africa, they brought football with them. After the decline of the empire, other countries kept the old tradition and started forming their own leagues and football clubs. So basketball and handball weren't as successful as football because they were not invented or practiced in England. But why is rugby not more popular than football, considering it was codified 18 years before? Well, it's because of professionalism and money. Football turned professional before rugby. Players could earn wages by playing the game, especially the working class who were very happy about it. Well, that's the short story. The big story is that in 1884, the FA had a problem. 30 clubs, which consisted of people from the working class, decided to boycott it by creating their own football association simply because getting paid from playing football was illegal, and they wanted to earn money via their new association. But they didn't create it, because 18 months later, in 1885, the FA legalized wages in football. And that's when it became a professional activity. In rugby, the opposite happened. There was Rugby Union, which is the equivalent of the FA in rugby. They didn't legalize wages, so the working class created their own association entitled Rugby League in order to become professional, and it was in 1895. Rugby Union, backed by the middle and upper classes, responded by banning anything related to Rugby League outside of England. Rugby League couldn't expand that much, and that's why you never hear about it, even though it's still played and it's very popular in Australia. So, if you are from the working class and you work 10 hours a day, and for example you earn £1 per hour, which equals to £10 a day, logically you won't sacrifice working hours of labor which will equal less money to play sport which doesn't pay you any money back. That's why most of workers chose football over rugby, because it gave them the opportunity to sacrifice hours of work to play professional football and still get paid. Rugby could have been the most popular sport on earth if the opposite happened. I think that football embracing professionalism so early on is the most important factor for making it the popular activity we know of today. The rules. An avid supporter of some kind of sport will know pretty much all of its rules. He doesn't only care about the final score, but also about stats and things that can't be evaluated by stats, like how good this pass is. On the other hand, casual fans, for example, the ones who become experts during the FIFA World Cup even though they never watch the game regularly. What makes them invested so much is the simplistic nature of the scoring rules in football. When the ball crosses the goal line, it's automatically a goal. Whatever the scoring method is, a tap-in or an Olympic goal, it counts as one. In handball, it's the same, right? Yeah, it is. Basketball has 3 rules. The free throw counts as 1 point, then we have the normal 2 points, then the 3-point shot. 3 different scoring methods. In rugby, well, depends on which rugby we're talking about. Is it Rugby Union? Rugby League? Let's not forget about Gridiron, as known as American football. Each one of them has its own scoring rules. Tennis, oh my god, tennis. Points, deuces, advantages, games, sets. Wow, take it easy tennis, no need to complicate stuff. It's just a game. Well, don't get me wrong. All the sports I mentioned have easy rulings, but my point is that football has the easiest scoring rules which you can understand in a millisecond. You won't be confused when watching football for the first time. A goal is a goal. But tennis, rugby? Now, what's so unique about football? Goal celebrations? Well, they exist in rugby too. Diving? Yeah, maybe, but that's cheating. Oh, I know. Handballs! You must not deliberately touch the ball with your hands. In approximately every sport, the use of hands is legal. I know you can use your feet in rugby and volleyball too. Yeah, you have the right to kick the ball. Unusual scenes, am I right? Football is the sport where the use of feet is the norm, unlike other sports. This might have helped popularizing the sport. The third thing for rules, football rules didn't change much since its very beginnings. If you go to China, Brazil, Italy or Bosnia, the rules for football are the same. It's universal. In other sports, it differs from region to region. For example, the duration of a football match is 90 minutes worldwide. Basketball in the US is 48 minutes with 4 stoppage times. They play 4 quarters of 12 minutes. Internationally, it's 40 minutes divided to 10-minute quarters. Football is universal. Rugby, oh my rugger. Generally, it is divided into 40-minute halves, but America's Gridiron is divided into 15-minute quarters. Plus in Rugby Union you have 15 players, in League you have 13, in Gridiron it's 11. Football is universal. Then comes sports that have no specific duration, like tennis. The longest tennis game took 11 hours and 5 minutes to end, and it was played on 3 separate days. The average tennis game takes about 3.5 hours to conclude, which is exactly 2 football games with stoppage time included. Some people have tight schedules, which means they don't know if a game is going to last 1 hour or 6 hours, so they don't get invested. Football is universal. Another aspect in football that makes it so different is the goalless games. Other sports don't have it, even in rugby, the cousin of football. It's so rare in rugby that the last game that ended goalless or pointless was in the 90s. Now let's compare it to football. Last season, in the top 5 European leagues, there were 130 goalless games out of 1,832 games. That's 7.1%. In football, you can witness a great game even if the score was nil. And in the 80s, Americans didn't like the tiny amount of goals in football, because on average only 2 goals are scored in a match. So they thought of making the goal bigger. Basically, a Gridiron goalpost but upside down, and also getting rid of the offside rule, so that more goals could be scored. That's stupid. I think I know who I'm giving the Donkey of the Century award to. America. America. Football is the most popular sport because it has the same rules in all of the world, unlike other popular sports. Height or stature. The average height of a male worldwide is 175 centimeters. The average footballer's height is 179 centimeters. Rugby is 183 centimeters. Tennis is 186. Handball is 181. Basketball is 2 meters. These stats are according to the 2016 Olympic Games data. Basketball and handball are sports that require a long stature to compete. It's rare for someone below 190 centimeters to play basketball, considering that approximately 50% of the world's male population is between 170 centimeters and 180. Even 190 centimeters isn't sufficient to play basketball, only if the individual was very skilled. Because in the NBA, the ideal basketballer's height is 203 centimeters. And guess how many men in the world are taller than 2 meters? Less than 0.1%. In tennis, height is also important, unless you're very skilled, but that's highly improbable. Today's best players, Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, are both 185 centimeters tall. In tennis, the taller the player, the faster and more accurate his serve would be. In rugby, height depends on a player's position. Some positions require to be very tall, some don't. The scrum half is a position that connects attack and defense in rugby, and it doesn't require to be tall. Football is played with feet, and that changes everything. You don't need to tower over everyone to play football. The only position that requires height is the goalkeeper, who are usually shorter than the average handball or basketball player. Preferably, the center backs should be fairly tall, but it doesn't mean that average height players can't perform there. In the other 9 positions, height is not a problem. You can find short, normal and tall players in attack, midfield and defense. The number of professional men football players worldwide is 16 million. Basketball, it's around 100k. Tennis, it's less than 1,000. It's just logical that people will choose football over other sports when the requirements of a professional career in basketball, handball and tennis dwarf the ones in football. The requirements and equipments. To play footy, you only need a ball and a field like any other sport. You can play the game on grass, sand, even hard surfaces. You don't need a real goalpost. You can make your own with just 2 rocks or backpacks. It's even better if you're playing in the street. Take a piece of chalk and draw a rectangle on a wall and tada, you have a goalpost. For rugby, you need to play on a proper field because you can't risk getting injured by tackling someone on a hard surface. Both of you will get injured. Rugby has probably the most injuries per player, so playing on a rugby field is a must. And that's one of the reasons people don't choose rugby, because it's for real men, who are not afraid to get all dirty catching a ball. Balls. The biggest problem in playing basketball is the basket itself. If you're from America or Canada, finding a basketball court is as common as pigeons in a city. Other countries, you can't just play proper basketball without joining a club. And using trash cans instead of a basket is not okay. And also, drawing a square on a wall doesn't count. To summarize, football doesn't require much equipment or special fields to be played on. Gain. Specifically, monetary gain. It's a known fact that money attracts people. Playing professional sports and earning loads of money are sides of the same coin. We often hear stories about poor guys who made it into sports and started earning millions of dollars. Winning a big salary in sports has a strong link with how much a sports league makes in revenue. These stats I'm gonna show you are for 2017 only. 12 out of the 20 top sports competitions classified by revenue are football tournaments. These leagues combined earn approximately $29 billion. In the same list, we only have 2 baseball leagues, one in America and the other in Japan, with $8 billion combined. 2 ice hockey leagues, surprised, with $5 billion in revenue. A Gridiron league, the NFL. A Gridiron league, the NFL, $12 billion in revenue. The Formula 1 with $2 billion, and lastly, the NBA with $7 billion in revenue. Since more countries are interested in the beautiful game, a football player will have more freedom and flexibility in choosing what country or club to play for. Whether it's England, Spain or Italy, he's going to play professional football in the highest level while still earning a great salary, and he'll experience a fair share of fame, which will attract sponsors, and sponsors attract more money and more fame too. There are around 2,600 players in the top 5 leagues in Europe, and the average salary is $2 million without endorsements. In the other side of the world, there is the NBA with approximately 500 active players, with a player averaging around $7 million in salary. If you ask me, that's pretty good. A lot good. But the NBA is the only basketball competition in the top 30 sports tournaments classified by revenue. It means that the NBA is the only choice for a basketball player to earn 8 digits in salary, which is not the case in football. So if you're a businessman or a country trying to invest in a sport or an athlete who wants to earn some good cash, well, football is the sport to choose. The various methods of scoring. Tell me, have you seen a sport with so much variety when it came to hitting the target that you can't even count them? Only in football. See, football has less restrictions than its counterparts, and that's where it thrives. Players can come up with whatever method they'd like to score in whatever position on the field. You can score headers, long shots, chip goals, solo goals, volleys, bicycle kicks, curved goals, chest goals, back heels, own goals, team play goals, butt goals. Yeah, as weird as it sounds, it does exist. Olympic goals, free kick goals. Free kick goals themselves have so much variety. Over the wall, under the wall, you can even avoid the wall. Also deflected free kicks. Goalkeeper nutmegs, scorpions, penalties, trivelas are fascinating too. All of these goals come in all shapes and sizes. A 20 meters long shot is not the same as another one from a narrower angle. Then you have when the player decides to mix between these techniques. For example, a long low driven curved shot, or a feint dribble followed by a chip shot, and the list goes on. Even the passes are as fascinating as the goals. Sometimes they are even more fascinating. The same goes for goalkeeper saves. No one forgets that legendary scorpion kick save by the Colombian Higuita. So can we summarize in a healthy sentence why football is the most popular sport? Football was born in the right place in the right time. And under good circumstances, it embraced professionalism and it spread around the world. It has a comprehensible set of rules that's made it easy to follow and play. No sophisticated equipments are required, only a ball is. And anyone can play this sport regardless of size and origin. So this is the end of the video about why football is the most popular sport. I hope you learned something from this essay, and go follow me on Twitter. If you have any questions, just comment them, and ladies and gentlemen, see you later.